The simple fact it's there brings transparency to the transaction, and they are singularly the coolest tech that I've seen at the moment. Good agents that I've seen out there know how to use them, and they use them to their advantage, and it's really working in the transaction.
Welcome to the Real Estate Coffee House. Today's feature is Long Black Tech Stack with Peter Schravemade. Michael and Peter have a spot saved for you at their table. Enjoy the chat. Welcome to the Real Estate Coffee House podcast. I am Michael Thorne of Remax Lifestyles Realty and the Thorne Maisie Bongers Real Estate Group in Langley, BC. And our guest on today's podcast is the managing partner for Reach Australia and is perhaps best known for his ability to identify impactful real estate trends and discard the time-consuming, fleeting fads. Our guest is Peter Schravemade.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
It's really nice, Peter, that you flew all the way in from Australia to sit down and do the podcast in my living room.
You know, it's your podcast. People fly in for miles to do this.
Now, a lot of people might know you as the face of Box Brownie, but you've taken a new position and role at Reach. So share with our listeners what Reach is and your particular role with them.
Yeah, sure. So particularly the Americans listening to this will know who the National Association of Realtors is, but most people in North America will. They have a venture capital arm called Second Century Ventures who invest in property technology, and Reach is really the facility that they use to do that. So in America, it's called the NAR Reach program. In Canada, it's called Reach Canada. In Australia, it's called Reach Australia. What these companies do is we identify new forms of technology, we invest in the new forms of technology, and we run them through a program that's designed to boost the companies and sort of grow them. What they may normally be able to do in 5 years, we try and do in 1 year. And that's also to bolster the investment that we've made in that. But my function is to run around Australia, and in fact, Asia Pacific is my role. Finding new forms of property technology and bringing them to market is kind of what I do.
Well, Peter and I are going to pour over how to create an ultimate real estate tech stack. But first, the news.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent news story, and I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
Each week, we take a few minutes with our guest to dig into a real estate news story. Now, this was in Newsweek, and the title of the article is What You Might Have Been Missing Out On in Your Real Estate Marketing. And it was an article written by Chris Bentley. I believe he's an agent. I think it's Bentley Fine Properties is his brokerage. And what he does is he lists 5 areas where he think agents might be missing out on their real estate marketing. And having someone like Peter as our guest is just perfect timing to talk about this. So he identifies 5 areas. Number 1 is boosting SEO with single property websites. And these are in no particular order. I don't think they are. The second one he mentions is using virtual staging to showcase your home's potential to buyers, creating video tours of listings, taking aerial photos with a drone, and the last one being using 3D virtual tours to enhance your listings. So I have written those 5 topics on a piece of paper that you have in your hand, Peter.
Yep.
Let's say that Chris is right. Those are the 5 areas that agents are missing opportunities in their marketing. For the average listing, could you rank those in order of importance, where you think the biggest opportunity for agents with their listings is, and rank them maybe 1 through 5?
Yeah, that's easy. Well, actually, I'm only seeing the list right now.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
So I believe using a 3D virtual tour to enhance interactive viewings is number 1. Anyone who's not doing that has missed the ball. It should be a default on all properties. So it's not a case of should I be doing it? It's a case of you're already behind if you're not doing that.
And that's a very interesting point, because that's something we've been doing a long time prior to COVID. Every listing gets a interactive 360 walkthrough. COVID's changed that a lot. I think it forced a lot of agents to make sure their first viewing was online. But I think the consumer is just so used to having that now that I can't imagine a listing without it.
There's 1,000 reasons why you should do it. Better qualification of people coming to the property, even from the perspective of it may rule someone out, is something that you actually want to happen. Like, I don't like a fireplace in a property, yet there's a fireplace there. Yeah. It's not showing up in any of the photos. It is the best way, in my opinion, to demonstrate what a property is a 3D virtual, or 360 is the other way it's called, virtual tour. It's the best way to look at a house. You can do it externally. So, it's not a case of just going through the interior. You can put it anywhere. I know you've been a great believer in them for years, using ImmoViewer, and whichever platform you're using, it doesn't really matter to either of us. You should be using it if you're trying to display a property. These days, it's dead simple to do. It's not a case of, do I need to hire a Matterport operator? The cameras that you can get to do it are like $400.
Yep.
So you can position them in a room, shoot it. There's a bunch of platforms now that you can upload these things to. So it's no longer a case of, it's newfangled technology. It's too late. Like, you should be already doing it. So to me, some of the other ones on here are optional. That one is
mandatory.
Mandatory. Yep.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, so what's number 2 on that list?
You know what? I'm going to go with taking aerial photos. I believe that's mandatory. It certainly is in Australia. If you haven't realised already, I'm Australian. I have a distinct accent. Could be New Zealand, but it's not. Sorry to the New Zealand listeners on this one. Yeah, drone photography tells people where your property is and identifies the landmarks around. Drones are equally accessible as 3D photography is these days, or 360 photography. So the ability to put a drone up at a property, I understand there are some places that are in conflict with air zones and whatever else, and that may be difficult. But by default, it's another thing that you should be using. It's such a cheap way or affordable way of showing people where the local attractions are, and that may be there's a shopping mall nearby, that may be the local school. It could be here is where the public transport is. It is just so easy to do that. Why are you not doing it on your listings might be a better question as to, should I be including it in my property marketing?
Great. Okay, number 3.
I like it's a split up here. I'm going to go, I do like the video tours. I also like the virtual staging. So there's kind of a tie for 3. Let me go with video tours first. Sure. I think video tours have a place for coming soon. Also, they really suit investors that are not in the area, or people looking to purchase that are not locally available, might be a better way of putting it. Video tours are simple. You now have 4K cameras in your hand.
Yep.
That's so easy. If you're really concerned about it, buy a gimbal. They're so easy to do as well. So, 3 of these, if I go to 3D virtual tours, aerial photos, and creating video tours of listings, they're so affordable in any kind of marketing budget. I don't care where you are. You could be in the middle of Winnipeg.
Jesse.
Hey, Jesse. You could be in the middle of Winnipeg, and it's still accessible. It's something that you can do. You don't need operators anymore to do it. So, the things that you can do yourself. So you might be in a metropolitan New York area, and that's fine. Get someone out to do it. You're time poor. There's all sorts of restrictions getting into the condo or the apartment that you're shooting. That's fine. I'm not. But if you're in a regional area as well, equally what I'm saying to you is that this is an investment. It's like turning up to a building site as a builder and not having a second hammer for when your hammer breaks. It's something that you've actually got to do to best demonstrate the listing to the person that's coming through. So I would say creating video tours as a default, those 3 things are things that are really simple to do and shouldn't be optional extras. And so coming in at 4th is using virtual staging to showcase your home to potential buyers, because not every listing you will need it on.
Yeah. And that was the one that I think was a bit of an outlier, Peter, because if a certain listing really requires virtual staging, its importance is dramatically higher than the average listing that you might not require that on.
Yeah. Well, I used to use virtual staging on anything that was vacant, but I used it more and more effectively on houses that were more angular. You might be in a suburb where all houses are the same, and therefore somebody looking in that area might view the house as similar. But the reason that you actually use virtual staging is not to dress a property up or make it look prettier or anything like that. It's actually to demonstrate what that room is to be used for, because you might have Jim, who's down the road sitting on his couch surfing the MLS, a buyer's agent sent it through to him. He doesn't know what a standard bedroom in Langley looks like. So he's sitting there going, well, what the hell do I do with that? It could be an office. It could be something else. Virtual staging is to demonstrate what the room does. The other use, really cool use I've seen for it, is in luxury listings where they will take a property that may be viewed by Chinese buyers, or it could be viewed by English buyers, or it could be viewed by Scandinavian buyers. They will stage it in multiple ways to match the incoming purchaser, to tell them what that room could be used in their own mindset. So there are a bunch of reasons to virtually stage something, and I would never do it to all listings because a lot of them had furniture, but any of the vacant ones that I had, as a very minimum, I'd stage the rooms that were most important, which is always the master bedroom. The living areas just by default, and sometimes to an extent an outdoor living area is very useful to stage because, again, they're looking at that going, I don't have any real depth of space. I see there's a yard. I don't know whether that's 6,000 feet worth of yard or whatever it is. So putting outdoor furniture into that gives them an idea of perspective.
And then last on the list, you've got obviously SEO of single property websites.
Yeah, well, I find that one an odd one because I do agree that you should boost the SEO on a single property website, but a lot of the single property website creators actually will do that for you. So it's not necessarily a task of an agent. If you go to Squarespace today, for example, and you create a website, or Wix, I think, is another big one out there. If you go to a lot of the single property website creators and you create one, they will just have a button that checks that goes, you should boost this SEO. So it's not some witch doctor science that you need to wave a magic bone over and go to Google and set up an analytics account. Although you certainly can do that if you're an avid user and you're at a high level. Like if I was to boost a single property website, I'd probably do it myself. But certainly there are companies out there that do it. And that's why I've kind of put that as fifth on the list. I also think quite often it's difficult to boost the SEO of 59 Smith Street unless you've called it something cool that people are going to search for. Boosting search engine optimization doesn't work if people aren't searching for that particular thing. So if I've got 67 Cuckoo Street, no one's going to be searching for that. So why would I boost the SEO on it? It's only going to show up in certain listings. Now, I might use search engine optimization on the website to then go and create a bunch of keywords that people would search for that may match that, like the suburb I'm in, or realtor, or a house. So yes, SEO is important, but I don't... On a single property website, it's really not the function of it. The function of that single property website should be as a landing page to drive people to that forces inquiry. And if you think about that for a second, a single property website should drive that person. It should have a hook on it that allows them to contact you in some way, shape, or form.
The pouring of a fresh cup means we're moving on to the main topic of today's chat with Peter Schravemade, which is long black tech stack. And each one of our episodes have a coffee pun. And apparently a long black is one of the most popular drinks, ways to drink coffee in Australia.
It is not.
Oh,
it is not. I think it's more popular here was popular in America. I don't know if it is in Canada.
Well, that's a Google search that didn't pan out. But let's focus on the tech stack part of it. So we're here to sort of pick your expertise. First of all, let's put the framework out there for our listeners. What, in your definition, is a tech stack?
Yeah, tech stack is the defining or the group of technology that you would use in either an agency or as an agent. So a tech stack could be specific to an agent. It can be specific to an agency. Franchises have tech stacks too. So, if you walk into EXP, they will have a tech stack that they recommend to you. A tech stack is just the collective term for the group of technology that somebody has put together in order to run something.
Now, by that definition, I think almost every agent has a tech stack.
They do.
Whether it's intentional or by a complete accident.
They do. And it ranges. It can be really, really, really diverse. I hear agents running around going, I've got AI in my tech stack, or I've got whatever. And, I kind of laugh at that because Adobe Acrobat has existed since the early 90s, and that's had artificial intelligence and the ability to read contracts and optical character recognition. But yeah, it can range from something as simple as Adobe Acrobat, just as a piece of software that comes default with every computer these days, all the way through to I'm using, the latest whiz-bang AI development for property technology.
So when I was getting ready for the episode, this is how I broke the sort of areas that a realtor might put together technology that he or she wants to work together. To me, there's 4 categories: prospecting, finding the next client, 2, marketing of the actual properties and marketing of ourselves. 3, the transaction management, sort of working through the actual process of getting a buyer to the close or getting a seller to the close. And then number 4, the past client, that ongoing nurturing over a period of time. Are those the 4 categories? Are there more that agents should be focused on, making sure that they have the right technology in there? And is it important that those categories flow from one into the next one, or are they individual silos for technology?
Yeah, there are more. There's a company called T360 or T3. I don't know if you've heard of them, but every year they divide tech stacks down into multiple, and I think they have about 30 categories, and they talk about top of funnel, before funnel. They talk about mid funnel. There are support services that, would include things like appraisals, for example, or inspections for building and pest or whatever. So there's a bunch of superfluous ones that kind of fit in. And then we have these gray areas that are like prop and fintech, or fintech ones that might apply to broking as well. Do they fit in the prop tech stack? I don't know. But if you really want to extrapolate it out, yeah, there are hundreds of them. But the way you described it there is pretty much a really simplistic way of looking at it. And I would use that. For any given agent that's out there, they're not going to care about the divisions of them that are down there. Really, the way you put it is the way I would be looking at it as an agent.
Do you approach building out your technology the same way I've been advised to time block, meaning put in the big boulders, the week's vacation, these big items that you have in your calendar, then you fill it in with rocks, and then you pour sand over top? Right. Is the mentality of building your technology stack to start with these big boulders, these applications that take up more room, and then making sure the other applications play nice? Or is it chronological that you build your tech stack out in?
It can go either way, and it depends on the way you operate, I suppose. And everyone has an individual way of operating. So, what I'm not going to give you today is a defined way of doing it, but the way that you spoke about just then, where you look for something that does the majority of the operations that you need as being the boulder, if you like. Yeah, that's a great way to approach it, because you want to tick off as many things as you can without overcomplicating the process. So, some people might have what you consider to be a boulder. They might have that in 4 pieces of technology. Now, is that ideal? It might work for them.
Yeah.
Because maybe their technological prowess suits that. And I think you're touching on a really good point, in that everyone will have a different approach to it. There are elements that should be the same, in my opinion. How you approach it, a really sound way is to actually look for something that does the majority of your work all in one, and then add pieces to it and make sure that they fit. But yes, it'll be different depending on who you are.
My amazing business partner, Jordan Maisie, we've been adopting new tech quite a bit over the last 3 years. And she wants something I want to go to one website. I want it to do everything. And the analogy that I was trying to figure out there was, tonight, Peter, I'm going to take you out to a sushi, pasta, steak, vegan, Vietnamese restaurant down the road. and I guess the analogy there is, how good can the sushi be at a place that also serves Vietnamese food and also steak and also vegetarian? Should we be looking for a place that does a ton of stuff, mediocre, or should we be saying this piece of technology is the absolute best at what it does, and it only does this one thing?
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't believe there is a piece of tech out there that does everything, and they will all have holes. So, I think the best conversations to avoid on social media is which CRM is best.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of guys going around, the one that you use, and the reason that they're saying that is because there's not one that does everything.
Yep.
We have a lot of really good CRMs here in North America. There are some amazing ones. And, as they go on, there are new things that are bolted on, and things that they haven't even thought of yet that will be bolted on in 5 to 10 years. So, that's fantastic, but there's not one silver bullet. If you're looking for that in technology, it just doesn't exist. There will always be deficiencies with one form of technology to another. And sometimes those deficiencies won't even show up when you're looking at them. They'll show up in a different market. So there are so many things to consider when you're looking at a tech stack to get it right.
So is the start really analyzing your business and being honest, really honest about how you operate? Because just because this has this newfangled silver thing and it's really fancy, shiny object over there, but you don't run your business that way, is the first thing to really analyze what you do and what you need and versus your needs and your wants?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of agents I deal with work on sphere of influence. They will harvest their own area. They'll harvest their own contacts. They'll maintain contact with them over extensive periods of time, and those people will be funneled in to become buyers over a period of time, and maybe even sellers. And that's a process that they go with, never having touched lead generation. But lead generation tech is this shiny new silver bullet, and it had a lot of media for years where people were developing AI to tell you who had just spent $30 at Home Depot on a new renovation to say that maybe they're ready to sell. But, if that's not central to your business, then are you not better focusing on the business that you've got in front of you that, is actually going to return for you? And that follows through to everything. Your CRM might be old, but it's working for you. There doesn't appear to be deficiencies. Now, that shouldn't stop you looking at new things, but you certainly need to weigh up the way that you work or operate as a business owner or as an agent in order to implement a new technology that may disrupt that flow and may prove to be, over a period of time, less commercially viable.
It's interesting you say it, because you are out there looking at new tech at its very early stages.
Yep.
Your version 1.0s of businesses, or even less than that. What decisions do agents have to do to future-proof the decisions they're making today? Because onboarding new tech, depending on how detailed it is, like our onboarding of our new CRM over the last year was a lot of work, but the investment was completely worth doing. The question is, what happens if that decision we made today, that company stops progressing, stops innovating, stops moving forward? Yep. How do we make decisions that not are only good today, but make sense for a business 5 years from now? It's
difficult. And there's no clear answer to that either. Like, what do you do with a business that is performing for you, but sells to a competitor? That's a follow-up question to that. The life cycle of a property technology company may not match up with your needs and wants, and quite often they don't. So it's very difficult to identify that. But I think to start off with, what would be a better way to look at that is, what are the new forms of technology we need to get on in order to be better? And they will differ depending on who you are. So let me take it back a step. You're a single operator or an independent operator. Technology for you should really be about trying to match the bigger boys. Technology for you should be, how do I make myself appear as though I'm a medium size or large brokerage? And I'm not saying team member size. I'm saying you're competing with people who have offices who might do marketing. So how do I do my marketing to match that office? Or when you get to bigger teams of 100 or 1,000, they have whole engines that are designed to come out and take photos. But how do I, as a single operator, compete with that on the stage that I'm given? Now, if you're a medium-sized operator, how do I compete with the big boys? And how do I stop from digressing back to be a single operator? What are the technology that I need to do in order to keep moving my medium-sized business forward and making it bigger and better? And I think there are better ways of thinking about it, rather than sort of going, well, should I just adopt a tech? So one is the life cycle of you as an agent, or where you're currently sitting and what your needs and wants are. You might be happy as a solo operator.
Yeah.
My goodness, there's a lifestyle attached to it. There might be, I'm going to sell one house a month for the rest of my life, and I'm just going to operate on those terms. The second part about that is, how do I stop from becoming a fossil? So let's remove the agency side. How do I not get ruled out by incoming technology? And on the way here to your house today, we were talking about DocuSign, and DocuSign's been around for donkey's years, like 25 years.
Yep.
Yet only in the recent pandemic did some people adopt it because they had to. And the stupid thing was, they probably should have adopted it 10 years ago. It's like what I'm saying about 360 virtual tours and 3D tours. They've been forced to by a particular period in time. And anyone, now then wanting to go back to that, well, I would argue that the consumer is telling you that they want it. the overall consumer experience. They don't want to have to sign in your time frame, or they don't want to have to wait for you to come out to their house. I'd rather, let's have this discussion. Let's send the contract. I want to place an offer straight away, and let's go and do it. So, there are forms of technology that you don't want to backslide. You don't want to appear to be an agent who's not actually in the current term, or has aged so much that you've become a legacy agent.
On that note, who's making the decisions that these new tech companies are listening to? Are these young tech companies, or I should say new tech companies, are they listening to the industry, or are they listening to the consumer?
Well, it's one of the things the REACH program does, is gives them access to what the industry is saying, but some of them listen to the consumer. So we have these disruptive technologies. One has just hit Australia, where it falls foul of the real estate regulation, and they haven't listened to the consumer or the industry. And so there are agencies signing up to them, only finding out that they're operating foul of the legislation that's there and the requirements to keep money held in a certain way. So technology doesn't necessarily have to listen to anyone. Uber came in and disrupted the taxi industry, and they didn't care. And over a period of time, they had to start listening to the local regulatory bodies, because they just shut them out of airports, or out of, in Las Vegas was a big one where they shut them out of hotels for a considerable period of time. So, my belief is technology should pair. It should, if you're wanting to sell to a real estate agent, then you need to abide by the rules that real estate agent is bound to, and that will be listening to local associations, MLSs, and the greater associations like CREA or NAR in my area, the REIs, or the Office of Fair Trading, and all around the world there are different regulations that exist for real estate. A stupid form of property technology will jump in and go, "We don't care what you say." Now, they'll either have to be a unicorn, or they'll leave the industry within a short period of time. And that example that I gave you in Australia, that property technology company is in all sorts of trouble right now, because they just haven't listened.
But when it comes to technology that agents or the industry implements, and some that don't implement it, the consumer will vote with their business.
Yep.
Look, I do want virtual tours. I do want to have a paperless experience. I do want to do these things. And it's unfortunate that you said, a lot of people finally adopted DocuSign over COVID. And I'm sure a lot of them go, "I should have done this years ago." Keeping up isn't really a smart use of technology. Differentiating yourself is.
Yeah, you make a very valid point. A lot of what we should be doing should be driven by the consumer. And the crazy part about that is you as a real estate agent yourself are consumer facing. Everything you do involves a consumer. We're a service-based industry. Effectively, we swap a service for money. That is what we do. It's service-based. So the minute that we as real estate agents stop listening to the consumer, that's when we die. And the crazy thing about that is, the more I think about it, the property technology that is started generally starts from a frustrated consumer. I have 3 in my portfolio in Australia who began that property technology as a result of a really frustrating experience as a buyer. Now, as you know, Michael, Australian buyers are very different to American buyers in that they don't work with the buyer's agent. But potentially, if we had a buyer's agent in Australia, maybe they wouldn't have experienced that frustration. So, there's this give and take, and it's really interesting. A lot of people say technology sets out to solve a problem. There's a lot of truth to that. It doesn't always have to do that. The example of Netflix is a bit different, where they set out to solve the problem of sending DVDs to people's houses. That's how Netflix began. Yep. And they ended up solving the problem of postage by streaming it. It was a problem they didn't even know they had, that they ended up fixing. But, coming back to the question, when we look at the consumer, consumerism drives a lot of the choices that we make. So what the consumer actually thinks about the technology is ultimately important. Zillow has done very, very well on the back of consumerism. They've suffered a hit in the last 2 years on the back of an iBuyer program that was quite, a brash and bold move, and a move to sort of attack the commission and the agent's position in that. But if you actually look at what they've done as a portal, they've hit out at the consumer. That's where they've gone.
When you build out a tech stack, you might realize there's some gaps, whether it's integration or whatnot. With new tech coming out, how important it is for them to look at API or even look at like a Zapier option to make sure that when agents are making decisions of tech they decided on 5 years ago, how important it is that what they do integrates in order to gain the dollars of an agent that says, at least this plays with what I already have.
Yeah, you've hit on a really, really, I think, unspoken issue in North American real estate, where you know, I have stats from, I believe they were actually bought out by RealTors, but they suggest that the average American, this is not a Canadian stat, the average American realtor uses about 24 point something different forms of technology in their tech stack, whereas I have statistics from Australia that say that the local Australian agents use only 8.3. You know, why is there that discrepancy? Where does that fit in, and how does that work? And you know, I always liken it to, I feel like North American agents treat that tech stack as though it's all different pieces put together. And I use a car to do this because it's not the way we buy a car. Your business partner seems like she's going looking for a Mercedes car that she can buy, and all in one, it will do everything she wants. It will get her from A to B. It might be luxury, whatever. Whereas the way a tech stack because there's not a silver bullet or a singular brand or multiple brands that will do the same thing. You know, I feel like the real estate tech stack is like you've got a General Motors Holden engine and it's strapped to a Mercedes chassis because you like that German engineering, but it's got a BMW exterior. Inside the seats, a Toyota. But, you know, we've got Dodge or Buick made headlights or whatever it may be, but you get the picture. We've strapped together all these pieces. And the question that you ask is, how do we know they all work together? API, for those who are listening, is an application programming interface, and it is the way software talks to each other or translates between each other. So we've built all these pieces for a car, but we haven't actually asked whether they all work or discuss amongst each other or send information to each other when they really should. And Zapier, one of the bits of technology that you spoke about just before, that's a really cool piece of software because Zapier generally works between everything. It can be an API. It's a bit of a what we call a flexible API where it speaks to a lot of these. But coming back to your question, it's a question that I don't think real estate agents ask when they adopt a technology. They go, "Oh my God, that thing is amazing. We're going to implement that straight away." But then they don't ask whether, you know, the output data from that will go into their CRM. And sometimes some of these forms of technology are so new that developing a full service API is something that hasn't happened. Having been a part of One Property Technology, I know when that happened in our evolution, and it wasn't at the beginning. So, you know, a lot of these amazing new products that you bring out, they will have limited APIs. And that all that really means for people who are listening going, "Oh, this is above my head," is they don't talk to each other.
Exactly. So you're solving a problem and creating something else at the same time.
That's right. Yeah. So, and the money that you spend on that newfangled thing that's going to get you more business faster for less money or whatever it may be, may cost you more money and longer term staff wages just trying to translate what is going on with that and throwing it into the engine. And let's speak about my previous company, Box Brownie. One of the most frustrating things for Box Brownie users before we developed an API was that I have to upload the image into your portal. I have to download the image after it comes back edited. Then I have to upload that into an MLS, which is a double handling. It was the most spoken about thing. But, you know, once we got the API, what could happen is people could log into their MLS, they could hit a button that says, "I want this enhanced," and it would just travel along. And that, you know, one thing doesn't sound like much of an issue, doesn't sound like much of a problem. But when you are in a rush to get a photo listed, it has to happen by X amount of date or time. I've told my vendor that we need to get it up there. But yesterday was really bad for shooting. It had grey skies. I've gone out today, whatever it may be. You know, that one API thing just sped up, you know, it sped up the communication, it sped up the flow.
Before we move on to the next segment, I'd be remiss if I didn't at least ask you this question, given your position at Reach. And you don't have to mention companies, but what type of product, what type of solution, what type of innovation are you seeing in startups that, like, this is going to solve a problem. This has got a bright future?
Oh, that's an easy question to answer. I have, the amount of offer management platforms that are out at the moment are solving a problem for the consumer, which we've spoken about quite a lot. And there are a number of them. A lot of them are Australian, which is why I know them. They've operated in Australia for a long time. There's one here in Canada called Open, which went through the Canadian Reach program. There's one in Australia called Market Buy. There's Offers that does this here in the US, but they're all different brands and flavors, but what they are bringing to the transaction is transparency, communication, and honesty. So anyone who's gone through the last 2-year period without a multiple offer situation, you're probably doing it wrong. Most of us have been in multiple offer situations, and I mean big multiple offer situations where there are 50 people and we're asking 50K above the reserve or more. I don't know what it's been like in Vancouver here, but that seems to be universally accepted. Yeah. What these offer management platforms do is they tell the buyer's agent when an offer has been seen by the seller. They tell as to whether they are the highest offer considered. There's a bunch of things that they do, and you can control how much information is seen or not seen. But the simple fact it's there brings transparency to the transaction, and they are singularly the coolest tech that I've seen at the moment. Interestingly, I see agents avoiding them. And the only reason they're avoiding them is they are fearful of the amount of information that now brings to the seller and the buyer. But good agents that I've seen out there know how to use them, and they use them to their advantage, and it's really working in the transaction.
Now it's time for Been There, Done That.
Tell him he gives me a cup of coffee, I'll answer his questions.
We're moving on to the rapid fire round of 7 questions focused on our guest's years of real estate experience. You might have to put on I'm a Realtor cap for a couple of these. Question number 1, you're moving to a new area. What would be the number one thing you'd be looking for in a new brokerage?
Yeah, good question. I'd probably be looking for leadership and management above all else. I feel I can bring to the table the other pieces that are needed in that area. But if the leadership and management are something that I could aspire to, or they're really setting up, then yeah, that would be what I'm looking for.
What advice would you give to an agent who's never experienced a dramatic market shift to help them get the most out of a changing market?
Life goes on. You're selling a basic human need. It's like food and water, shelter's right up there. People still get divorced. They still get married. They still have babies. They need a roof over their head. And life goes on. People who've been through these transactions before will tell you that, normalcy will come. Hold on as best as you can, but life goes on.
Number 3, in your business today, what single activity or product gives you the best ROI of your time and or dollars?
Our remote staff every day of the week, and that's in all of the businesses I operate, but our remote staff are irreplaceable. The ability to hire someone for, a lower cost than what we're on, who are actually have a different cultural work ethic, will work and just consistently deliver, and you're solving a problem for them as well.
Number 4, what is the worst movie you legitimately enjoy?
I like a lot of action movies that nobody else enjoys. I'm going to put the Terminator series up. I think some of them are shocking, but anyway.
Number 5, what is the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
The best piece?
Yeah.
Years ago, a mentor of mine, his name was Silly Solly. His name was Solomon, and he ran a bunch of, you've got Dollarama stores up here. I don't know what the equivalent of those are in the US, but he ran a bunch of these discount stores, and he called me the fireman. He always said fireman. There's an element to which I do business where I analyze the pieces that are out there, but he said the number one thing I could tell you is to trust your gut on a lot of these decisions. And I've used that quite effectively in clutch calls where I go, I don't really know what's going on, but the person I'm dealing with at the moment, I'm getting a good read. They're a good human. I think I can do business here.
Number 6, from a 30,000-foot view, what is something you wished you could change about the industry?
Well, there are a few things. I wish if I had a wand and I could wave it, I wish I could get rid of agents who do not transact on a regular basis. I think that would solve a lot of that. That's my wish for the North American industry, because we've already got that in Australia. But if I had one wish here, it would be to get rid of the time wasters. As a vendor selling to them, those people will be the greatest waste of your time as a vendor, but they also get in the way of really, really good agents being more successful than they probably could be. And I think you'd see a more holistic industry when you've got, stupid numbers like 80% of an industry that sell less than 2 houses a year. There is a dramatic problem. Every time you go for a vote to increase the wages that you have to spend as a realtor or a real estate agent, you've got 80% of them saying we don't want it, but they're not selling houses. And that voice should not really be there, because I think there's a big difference between them being an amateur and a professional.
Number 7, in one sentence, how would you sum up the internet?
One sentence. A global playground.
Thanks, Peter, for being my guest and spilling the beans on how to create the ultimate real estate tech stack. And thank you to the listener for joining Peter Schravemade and myself for a chat about Long Black Tech Stack here at the Real Estate Coffee House. We hope to brew up some value for you, and remember to enjoy the grind.
That's this week's episode of the Real Estate Coffee House podcast with your host, Michael Thorne. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode. The Real Estate Coffee House podcast is brought to you by Thorne Maisie Bongers Real Estate Group with Remax Lifestyles Realty in Langley, BC. Thank you for listening.